Welcome to the Food Bloggers Table. Pull up a chair for authentic conversations and actionable advice from fellow food bloggers and industry experts. I'm your host, Jen, and I create custom food blogs designed to earn top-tier ad income. Join us now at the table as we break bread and build brands. Is your food blog secure? That's the question that people want to know. Can you tell me how one might go about determining whether or not their food blog is actually secure?
Sure. The beauty of WordPress is that you can be as insecure as you want or as secure as you want. And we would like to be at a happy medium, right? We don't want to make it too difficult where you can't get into your own site most of the time, but also don't want it so insecure that anybody else can get in.
Exactly.
Some of the biggest things that a lot of people have problems with is they add users over time. Other users, maybe somebody that might be helping them out as an editor or an admin, and they just leave them as that role, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. That typically is going to get hacked over time. Because what happens is, especially nowadays, is that everybody's information gets thrown out in the dark web from some hack somewhere.
Yes.
So the most common hack that we see is what we call brute force, where they have figured out the password or they know the username and they try to figure out one or the other. And they just go through and they use scripts. And when they break in, then they add in a plugin or they add in some type of script and then malware all over your site. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you clean up your users, and you should rotate your password regularly. That could be on an interval that you choose, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. But don't make it easy. Easy passwords like that you use for your bank and that you use for everything. One password should never be used for everything.
Yes.
I feel like I shouldn't even have to say that, but it's still so common that people use very short passwords. So if you haven't invested in a password manager, that might be something to think about, where you can use these crazy long passwords that it'd be very hard for somebody to pick up, and you can just use what they call a master password and log in once. I use that. I wouldn't be able to survive without a password manager. So that's like a big thing. Also, plugins, keeping your plugins updated is a big one. With WordPress, the beauty of it is that there's so many plugins that you can choose. The downfall is that there's also so many plugins and they're not always kept up. So plugin security is the big one. It doesn't mean that you have to make your updates right away on your plugin, like the day they come out, because oftentimes there might be bugs.
Right.
So check the change logs in the plugins, and you can do that when you see the little update thing. It'll say view details, and you can click on the change log or the developer tab in the little box that pops up, and you can see if they talk anything about security. Most good plugin authors will say they fixed a security bug or something, and so you'll want to update those. But keeping plugins updated and just keeping solid plugins. I know we all have problems where we just start downloading and installing plugins over the years, especially as you just start going and you read a blog post about this, and then you read a blog post about that, and you install them. You might not even use one of them, but you forget to remove it. We do plugin audits often where we actually check to see if the plugin's being used to the best of our ability. Sometimes it's not as easy as it is others, but we try to see if it's being used, and we try to clean it all out, because that's probably a big one, is that people just have a large amount of plugins that might not even be used, or they're duplicating functionality. There's some plugins that work well together, but you can hit the wrong settings and then they conflict each other because they might do something slightly similar, but it can get kind of messy. So doing regular plugin audits, I would say probably only like every 6 months. If you're actively working on your site and doing stuff on it, then doing a plugin audit is pretty good. One that some people like to do and others don't like to do is a two-factor authentication. This is where you typically have an app on your phone, or some will send you an email. The email one is not as secure, but if you have the app on your phone that runs through codes, you can set that up. There are several plugins, like WordFence has it. There's also just WordFence login security plugin, which isn't the whole WordFence. It's just for login security. So two-factor, and then you make two-factor required for all of your users, mainly your admins and your editors, people that can make changes in your site.
Right.
If you have like a WooCommerce site or e-commerce, you typally don't want to do two-factor on your customers, because
that's all
they
you'll
won't
deal
ever be
with
able to
is
get in to
customers
download
having
their stuff.
issues.
Yeah.
Why
You
can't
would
I get
be
in?
dealing with support tickets all the time
Oh my
of them
gosh.
not being able to get in. So, and they can't really make changes in the
Right.
site. So you don't have to do it for that, but two-factor is good. Also, if you have Cloudflare or your host can do it, there's ways to reduce or put high security just on your login page. So every WordPress site has the same login URL. Like the ending slug of it is wp-login.php. And if you don't change it, bots just know. So they'll go there. But Cloudflare has a way that you can put high security on that page, or your host can do it. If you want to get really technical about it, you can get your host to block all IPs to that page except for yours. And if you ever need anybody to log in, you can get your host to add that IP address. The only issue is if you're traveling, guess what? You're not gonna be able to log in. So you're gonna have to get your host to
I would be that
open
person that would
back
be
up.
freaking out because I would be like, oh, look, I've got this great security. Oh my gosh, I've logged myself out. It's 100%.
Yeah, that one's not as popular. I only deal with a couple sites that have that. So it is a little bit harder to deal with when my team has to be doing the work and not me, because it's only my IP whitelisted. And then there's some people that have dynamic IP addresses where it's not static, so it switches. So they'll always have problems. So that one, I wouldn't just go with it. Think about it.
For sure.
And then there's also a way to change your login URL. Like WPS hide login is an easy plugin to do this. So you can change it to something else. You wouldn't want to change it to your name. You wouldn't want to change it to your site name. It's something that you would remember that somebody else typically wouldn't know, right? And that is a great way to reduce bot attacks on your login page. And for security, actually, one of the biggest is actually backups. And a lot of people don't think that as security, but that's like the ultimate insurance policy for your website. And a lot of good hosts have backups, but you always want more than one. You always want more than one backup, because hosting backups do fail. They can have missing information. I've been doing this for 20 years. I have seen where the hosting server fails, the backup server fails, and there's nothing. You can't restore anything. That actually happened a couple years ago to a host that had some really high profile sites on them. And they were down for 2 months because they had no backups. And it took 2 months for the host to recover them.
Goodness.
So having offsite backups is huge. And offsite, we mean it's not stored on the server. It's stored on Google Drive, Dropbox. You know, like if you're using a service, like some people use Us to do that. They're all stored in Amazon S3 instances, which is just like a file storage system. So it's not connected to your host in any way. And then some people will download backups like monthly and put it on their computer. Not as good, because you could miss a lot of stuff, but better than nothing. That is a huge one, because if you get hacked or you make a mistake or something happens and you don't have a backup, it's going to be a nightmare. We get those emails often, and it's such an easy and inexpensive thing to fix that would be the number one security thing that I would tell people, is just have some backups, more than one backup. Never trust a hosting backup, no matter how good they are. You always should have something else. And then you could do firewalls as well. WordFence is a firewall. Cloudflare has firewalls. Many hosts have their own firewalls. That just helps with general security and scanning. But if you knock down keeping your plugins clean, keeping the users updated or out, if you don't need them, delete them, your password changed and all that kind of stuff, if you do that, you're generally pretty good.
So if you hire someone to do something for you, when they are done doing said thing, just delete them. Then you can always add them back. I've worked with clients before, and I'll design their website for them, and then they don't need me for anything else. So they'll remove me as an admin. And then if they come back to me and they say, hey, I need you to do something for me, they just add me back in. It's not a big deal. It takes 2 seconds of their time, and it protects them from somebody accessing my login or my information.
Yeah, because your admin could be hacked, and it wasn't actually you that logged in, but somebody hacked yours just because it's on there. So there, as you said, there are two ways really to do it. You can downgrade somebody to no role, which means that your user's still on there, but nobody can do anything with it. Like if you logged in, there would be nothing there.
Gotcha.
Can't do anything. So it's even less than a subscriber role. So they can do that if they're going to use you. We have clients that do that with us, where they use us on a regular basis, but not enough to be an admin all the time. Like for our monthly support people. The big thing with deleting is that if somebody was a designer was doing work for you, you're going to delete them, but there's going to be a question that says, hey, do you want to attribute their content, or do you want to delete their content? You do not want to delete their content, because that'll delete the entire design, menu changes, and all that kind of stuff. We've seen that before.
Oh, that's scary.
All you have to do is, it's just an extra button. It says attribute to content, and you pick your user. Or another admin, typically it'd be your user. And then all that info would just flow to your user, and everything would just stay the same. We have customers, when we do something like CSS styling or something like that, if they would delete us and hit delete content, all the CSS that we added in the customizer would be wiped.
Oh my gosh.
So
have you had people do that?
Many a time. And so it's not as fun. That's when backups help.
Oh,
So
okay. So another one for
yeah,
backups. All
that's
right.
when backups help. So that's just a little nuance when you're
Mm-hmm.
cleaning up that you want to make sure that you pay attention to. If it asks you to attribute the content and it is a user that has done work on their site, you want to make sure to attribute it. Now, the caveat to that is that if you have been hacked and they create a spam user and you go and delete it and it says attribute content, you don't want to attribute that content because that content is most likely spam. If you know you worked with that person, it was maybe an editor or a designer or somebody, you want to attribute that content.
Certainly.
If not, and it's a fake user, which is probably more common than people think inside of a
Mm-hmm.
hack, you'll see a user that shouldn't be there. Email address doesn't make any sense. Username is like, that's not right.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and delete that and then just
Okay.
hit the delete content with it.
Okay.
So you get rid of all the junk that goes through there. But on top of that, one really important thing is that if you're working with somebody, like if you work with us or someone like you, and we have to get onto your host or we have to get into your Cloudflare or something like that, that means if you can't add them as a collaborator, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
provide the password, make sure you change your password to your hosting account or Cloudflare or whatever it is. Or if you've added us as a collaborator in any of these systems, make sure to remove us. A lot of people
Exactly.
only remember to remove you out of WordPress. They don't
Mm-hmm.
remember to remove you out of the hosting access or
Email access, literally all, I mean, it's like
yeah,
we have
Kit
all
access,
of
the Convert
the
Kit or whatever it's
accesses.
called now, Kit or Mailer Lite or anything. If
Right.
you've given somebody access and you no longer work with them anymore, or if you just don't need them to do any of that stuff anymore in there, make sure just to clean that up. Like it's probably a good idea. Again, go through that every 6 months to make sure that you don't have anybody that you're not working with anymore inside of your users, inside of your hosting access, email access, whatever it is, especially if you're using a VA. Not all services allow you to just add collaborators and add users.
Sure.
This is when a password manager is like really good because you can share. I use Bitwarden. I used to use LastPass, but it kept
Mm-hmm.
getting hacked so much. I stopped using LastPass.
It's like something's wrong with when your
Yeah,
password protector is getting hacked. Something
yeah.
doesn't feel right there.
But that was many of those services have features where you can share a login, but they can't see the password.
Right.
So you can easily reject them and remove them from that password manager, and they don't know the password. You
Mm-hmm.
still probably should recycle the password or change the password after you do that, but that's where password managers are excellent, especially if you're working with a team on a regular basis or contractors or whatever.
That makes a lot of sense. How would you basically condense down a lot of the things that we've talked about in this particular episode and say, okay, if you do these three things, you've pretty much got a pretty good blanket over security. There's always more you could do, sure. But what would you say would be the top three things you would suggest?
Backups.
Okay. Obviously,
Having solid
backups, number one.
have solid backups. Second one would be plugin audit, clean out your plugins, check your plugins, and along that side that do the user audit as well. I'll combine those two
Sure.
because you're already doing kind of an audit of those things.
Right.
Clean out users that don't need to be there, change your password on a regular basis. And then the third is just kind of do that like hardening a little bit, changing the login URL or putting on a Cloudflare or hosting fire or like a security system on that login URL. Either one will work. Tightening that login URL, and then you could do two-factor authentication as well. And then, yeah, some type of security system. It can either be a plugin or it can be through your host. You can talk to your host. You can subscribe to a service that has kind of like malware scanning and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably the three most important. And that should get you in a good place. And again, it's never a set and forget. With these things, it's not a set and forget. So you can't just set it up and be like, I'm good to go. Hacking changes constantly. They get crazier and wilder.
Yes. And so much smarter. And I cannot keep up.
They are very good. For many of them, this is all they do. They don't do anything else. So you have to just be cognizant and really know your site and be looking at it and going, is that, I don't remember putting that there. And I would say auditing, which is kind of the second part, would be a big portion. So backups, auditing, and then kind of like hardening would be
Okay.
the third one.
Okay. And how often do you think someone should do this? Like weekly, monthly? I mean, obviously, if they could do it every day, sure, that's even better. But
Yeah, I mean, if you have the hardening done and all that kind of stuff, the auditing could be done every quarter, every 6 months. And that depends on really how active you are on your site. If you're doing an initial setup and new, you're on there a lot more messing with plugins and stuff like that. So that one might be like an every quarter thing. In the
okay.
beginning. If you're more seasoned and been doing it for a long period of time and you don't really mess with plugins and stuff like that, and you're just dealing with like creating content and marketing
Right.
content, maybe every 6 months would be a good time. And these don't really take that long. That's the beauty of it. It's really not like you don't have to sit down and go, this is going to take 3 days.
Yeah, exactly.
It shouldn't, like hour max is what a lot of these little audits can take. So
Nice.
That's what I would focus on.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Food Bloggers Table. I'm your host, Jennifer Holt, and I look forward to serving you in the next episode.